The first person we have to thank, or the first thing that we have to thank, is God. God worked miracles in this country this last week, and we would be remiss and really poor children if we didn't recognize his hand in this election. It is incredible what has happened. I told you before, I can find a million ways this thing flies apart, but there's only one way we hold it together, and that's God. And I think we've all witnessed that. Now, on the human level, one of the guys who I don't think has gotten enough credit yet, but will get all the credit he deserves, is Charlie Kirk. Charlie started something called Turning Point USA. I know you know of it. He is the host and founder of, the founder and CEO of Turning Point, also the host of the Charlie Kirk Show. But this guy, I don't know what we would have done without you, Charlie. I mean, you really turned the vote out. Thank you.
Well, Glenn, first of all, you said it correctly. Glory be to God. We were a couple millimeters away from the entire country going into bedlam. You that's so perfectly said. Throughout the entire campaign, I had this spirit of paranoia. Like, are we really going to do this? Are they going to come up with another sneak attack? Are they going to do another COVID? Are they going to? And at every corner and every turn, and so glory be to God. God is not done with this land, Glenn, and God is not done. And then second, I wish I could take credit for all this, but is the American people. And I know it sounds cliche, I know it sounds generic, but the American people withstood the most intense propaganda political hurricane of American history. There's never been anything like it. It was worse than 2020. It was worse than 2016, calling us Nazis and fascists and, saying that Donald Trump was going to, put people in camps and all that. And the American people weighed their options despite Kamala Harris outspending Trump three or four times to one and make the right choice. But look, we played a small role, and we did it in two ways. We said on this election, we want to try to lose by less with younger voters, and then we are going to create the most sophisticated, low propensity, get out the vote turnout machine in modern political history for the right. And here was our theory of the case. First on the get out the vote, which is that we believed that there were millions of people that were Trump supporters that were not Trump voters. The people that would say, yay, Trump, and they would be with them, but they weren't putting a ballot in a box. They weren't casting a vote. And we tested the theory of the case when I started to go to Trump rallies, and I would ask people, and I'd take a lot of selfies. People are super nice, and they love the country. And 1 out of 30 people, I'd say, hey, are you registered to vote? And they'd say, oh, yeah, I think so, yeah. And I'd get this kind of, half answer. And so I went back to my team. I said, guys, I think there's a lot more in this reservoir than we realize. And so we compared it with the data, with the Trump campaign, which we were allowed to do thanks to a FEC ruling back in the spring. And we said, guys, let's beat the left at their own game. Let's engage in early voting, even though it's a flawed system, in a way that has never been done before, because it gives us actually more days to get low likely voters to go vote. If you have 30 days to do it, you can then get someone who is not as easy to persuade to vote, because then you can get 5 or 6 touches on them. So we hired well over 1,000 full-time people. It's the greatest ground force that's ever done. We raised tens of millions of dollars, praise God, from our donors. And we pitched them on this saying, hey, the road to the White House is going to be going through these states. We know that. We're going to need to first register a ton of voters, build relationships in communities, and then drive a turnout machine over a 30-day period to get Donald Trump across the finish line. And the states that we primarily focused on was Arizona, Wisconsin. We had some work, of course, in Pennsylvania and Georgia, but really Arizona, Wisconsin. And in Wisconsin, I can tell you that if it wasn't for our effort, Donald Trump would have fallen short. We chased in excess of over 70,000 low propensity voters in Wisconsin.
Wow.
Donald Trump won by 28,000 votes. Here in Arizona, as we are speaking, we still have 850,000 votes left to count. We like to take at least 90 days to count our ballots here. It's a joke. And Kerry Lake is only down 40. It's really something else.
I know it is.
By St. Patrick's Day, we'll find out who won the Senate race. But Kerry Lake is down 44,000 votes here in Arizona, and she might fall 10,000 votes short or win by 10,000 votes. But thanks to our effort and the team, we closed an 8-point polling gap for Kerry Lake. And so, look, basically what we did is we took this movement that Donald Trump created, that Donald Trump led, and we added machinery to the movement. And we were able to successfully turn Trump supporters into Trump voters.
You know, Charlie, I've been, obviously looking at this forever, and we've never had a GOP that could get out of its own way. We've never had one that was competent. We never had a plan other than, hey, we're just better. And we lost it every time because we were either stupid or we just couldn't get out of our own way and get people to the polls. This time around, I felt real confidence that the GOP had these issues covered at the polling places, that it was going to be secure, that if it wasn't, they had the attorneys and they had everybody else out there, just like the Democrats do, and we were going to catch the bad guys if the bad guys showed up. So I had that confidence, and I also had confidence because of what you were doing, that we were going after the low propensity voter, that we,
yes.
I've said for years, hey, somebody should get a bus like they do and get people on a bus and take them to the polls. Somebody should do this. I know you did. And that made all the difference in the world.
Well, thank you, Glenn. And let me say one thing, which is that, again, our theory of the case was that, okay, the RNC was going to limit some of the shenanigans, which, by the way, we didn't completely eliminate. Without that, we would have Senator Mike Rogers and Senator Hovde in Wisconsin. But one of the ways you offset the shenanigans and the tomfoolery is you outnumber them. And so you have so many ballots in the volume of the system that, their midnight drops in Milwaukee are just not going to be sufficient. And it turns out that that was a correct way of looking at it. And I want to say one other thing, though, is that this was very, very difficult work, and our team deserves enormous credit. Not just the full-time staff. You'll love this, Glenn. We did a thing called Commit 100, where we said, hey, if you're across the country and you're tired of just listening to talk radio and watching TV and seeing your country fall apart, if you will be able to fly yourself to Arizona, we'll put you up in a hotel room for a week or two, and we will give you the mobile technology to go chase ballots. We had over 2,000 people from across the country that were working neighborhoods in Arizona to go chase ballots. 2,000 volunteers from across the country, on top of, in Arizona, our 600 full-time people on the ground. So we blanketed the state. And Arizona, again, it's my passion, is the best performing of the 7 battleground states, and we're still counting votes. It's the greatest swing of any battleground state from 2020. And it should give your audience a lot of renewed confidence, is that we are catching up to how the left has gamified our elections. They turned it into a game. Who can get the most amount of pieces of paper in the box? And we were still dealing in an antiquated mindset where we believed that elections were just about worldview and values and issues. Back in like 2004, the left, they changed all the rules and they made them permanent during COVID. And between 2022, especially in 2024, we learned the rules, we caught up, and then we beat them at their own game. And that is what is so promising and encouraging, that we were able to add this machinery to a once-in-a-generation movement. And I will add one other thing, is that some people are saying that it was a landslide. It was. However, Glenn, we're talking about Donald Trump. The final canvases will come out. He won Wisconsin by 30,000 votes. Pennsylvania, 1 point. Michigan, 1.5 points. Without the turnout operation, without the voter integrity operation from the Trump campaign and the RNC, you could make an argument. And also the second layer is that we did 25 points better with younger voters. We won the youth vote in Michigan. We almost won the youth vote in Wisconsin. Yeah, go ahead.
What do you attribute that to, other than your work and the work of others? And do you how much do you put into Elon Musk, RFK, Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn?
Huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, Elon Musk is an American hero, and that guy is the best of America, who decided to just put everything on the line for his country. And I can't say enough good stuff about him. And by the way, President Trump deserves so much credit for doing these long-form podcasts. This was the election of the podcast. And Democrats were unable.
This is the end of the mains. I said this the week before he went on Joe Rogan. I said, you watch. Joe Rogan, he'll go on Joe Rogan, 100 million people. and it will be the end of the mainstream media. This will show everybody for 2028. There's no reason to do a debate on ABC. There's no reason to go do an interview with CBS. Why? Why would you do that? Everything changed this time.
That's exactly right. And I attribute a lot to that. And in addition, Donald Trump was able to sit for 3 hours with no notes and go deep on the issues and have a total command of the subjects. And people, here is the new standard, though, and the Democrats have to know this. You will never win another presidential election if you nominate a candidate who is unable to do long-form podcasting. People won't trust you, period. End of story. And if you do not have a candidate that can go deep and that can think on their feet and have memory recall and be personal and charming and affable, the American people will reject that. Long gone are the days of 7-minute, 60-minute interviews, right? Or 10-minute meet the press where you have 5 questions and they're prepared and that's it. Now you have to earn the vote because people are going to listen to you for 3 hours and see your tone and your inflection and whether you mean it. And so Donald Trump excelled in that. And Joe Rogan deserves such credit for having the platform. And to his credit as well, he was very fair. He wanted to broker a fair, deal where Kamala was invited and Donald Trump. The other thing I will say, though, and I think you'll appreciate this, Glenn, with younger voters, is that there was pent up rebellion energy amongst young Gen Z voters, especially men, for how they were treated during COVID. During COVID, they had their proms canceled, their graduation, summer class. A lot of their friends committed suicide. They're part of this generation that was hyper propagandized by the left-wing woke stuff during the summer of Floyd. And they realized that it was lies and that it was misrepresentations. And then they get their news from podcasting. And podcasting kept on talking about how great Donald Trump was and how awful Kamala was because that was the right framing. And the generation started to tilt right. And what was so remarkable is that Democrats, they didn't see this coming. They were so confident, they were so cocky that younger voters were going to continue to support them. Again, you could make the argument if it wasn't for the mass movement of younger voters in some of these states, Donald Trump might not have won. And again, the Sun Belt was a separate story. We did very well in the Sun Belt, 4 or 5 point margins, but the Rust Belt was 1.5 point margins. We're talking about 30,000 votes here. So all these things add up in a very significant way. And it also should give your audience such hope. There's almost no documented case of a generation that becomes more liberal as they get older. So the fact that this generation is the most conservative voting generation since 1988, that means that the future is only going to get redder. It's only going to become more conservative as they own property and get married and have children. So our starting point is the best starting point for our political movement since Ronald Reagan. And credit to Donald Trump. And please, sorry.
And I think that it is only going to grow from here if Donald Trump can tick off the things that are on his list to do. So, Charlie, we were talking about why Trump won. Why did Kamala lose?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, and again, I will say that the narrative should be that Trump won more than she lost. However, she was unable to do the basic, as we say, long-form podcasting. She misread the room. And I think a really interesting story that needs to be explored is where did all the money go? This is the best-funded campaign in history, $1 billion, now $20 million in debt. And I have a personal axe to grind here because, we were one of the groups that the media was setting up to fail. Okay, let's just be honest. There was so many articles written in the last couple of months. Trump team takes big risk outsourcing GOTV to Turning Point and Elon Musk. You probably saw the stories, right, Glenn?
Yeah, I did.
Every major outlet. And they were setting us up to fail. And we would get on the phone with these reporters and we'd say, hey, we're doing real things. Maybe you guys should be more nuanced. And they say, well, the Kamala team has the most sophisticated get out the vote operation ever and this ground game, and they're knocking on tens of millions of doors. And we'd tell them, and this was true, I said, never conflate results and activity. The Kamala team was doing a lot of activity, but they weren't producing results. So the Kamala ground game was completely overrated. Somebody made a lot of money and misled a lot of people and a lot of Democrat donors. But let's just be honest on the let's just also on the issues, though, is that Kamala Harris and the entire regime, they were trying to continue to occupy a country that they resent. And that, as a basic operating formula, is an almost impossible way to hold on to political power. You can't continue to govern a country when you disdain the people that you are tasked to oversee. And I mean, we can go one example or the other. I'm sure you've covered this on your show, but Starr County, Texas, which has not voted Republican in over 100 years, the most Hispanic county in America, Donald Trump won. I mean, there was this multiracial reckoning against the Democrat Party, young, old, Black, Hispanic, and finally, Kamala Harris and her entire team, they did everything they possibly could to not defend their own positions, but try to make it a referendum on Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump received quite a gift. He received a gift because for the first time since Grover Cleveland, he was able to embrace the advantages of being an incumbent and the advantages of being a challenger. So think about it. He could say how great my record was and how terrible the person currently in office is. If you think about that analytically, it's almost an impossible, it's impossible to beat that because you could be incredibly, you could be very, very critical. So that wins you points. People went like that in politics. At the same time, you can also have a sterling record to run on. So it's not just hypotheticals. And so Donald Trump leaned into the best of all circumstances, being a challenger and also an incumbent. And and also, I mean, Kamala Harris didn't have a primary. That's another thing that I said is when you try to implement a candidate without a primary, don't assume that all the Democrats are going to support you. I have many other thoughts on this, Glenn, but
I've got just about 30 seconds here before a break, so a good time to just take a breath. I do want to go back to that, but I also want to go back to Hispanics because they have alienated themselves with everybody. Now they're talking about how Hispanics are anti-Black, and I've heard Black are anti-Hispanics. I mean, they're at war with themselves. I don't know how they come back from this, but, vampires you always think are dead, but they come back.